Thank you, Dan. Thanks for introducing me. And it's such a great pleasure to be here, participating once again in the Spiritist Symposium. 14 years. Can you believe that? Time flies. Uh, Such an interesting thing. It's even difficult to greet people on a virtual event like this, because if I say good morning, I'm going to be writing some places wrong in others. Good afternoon, same. Good night, some. Good evening, same thing. So it's difficult. Isn't that just beautiful? Everybody's connected. There is no such a barrier of time anymore, time zones. That's absolutely beautiful. And that's why I love so much talking about spiritism. And this is a fascinating topic that I'm going to try to convey to you. I want to bring something on the screen so you can follow me here. So we are going to talk about this spiritual and intellectual growth of humanity hand in hand. The title itself is already very challenging, and it's a fascinating topic. And for me particularly, what makes it fascinating is once we start to go into the mechanics of all this thing, how it works, what's behind the scenes, and so and so, it widens our perspective on morality and intellectuality, intelligence, all of those things. And it will give us a different view of things. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to get that through to you today. Every time we speak about something spiritual growth, spiritual progress, in theory, we are talking about morality. That's our moral standards. That's at the spirit level. Intellectual, on the other hand, has to do with intelligence, has to do with our intellect. And the thing about Spiritism is trying to explain to us how this thing works, how both of them, morality and intelligence, go hand in hand. I know it's very challenging because, especially in the days, the past couple of weeks, a lot of different things have emerged out of the news, and we are all questioning: is it true? Is it not? Well, let's try to get some message here and see where we can get. The Spirit's book is very clear about certain things. Susanna was actually able to bring us some of those. But to get started, Allan Kardec, in the Spirit's book, publishes one of the answers from the Spirits, where they say that there are two kinds of progress, and they're not in tandem. They are intellectual progress and moral progress. So to begin with, they are not aligned with each other. So we could not even expect that to happen. Although I think that's the desire for at least most of the population, I would say, that these two things would be in tandem, but they are not. And he goes a little further down to explain to us that moral progress is a consequence of intellectual progress. Well, hold on. So there's a law of cause and effect here. One thing makes the other happen. So intellectual progress has to come before moral progress. And how can we deal with that? How can we explain that? We need to elaborate a little bit more so it makes a little bit more sense. But then Allan Kardec goes back to the Spirits and he asks, how come? How is that possible? And the answer is right here on the screen. As you can see, intellectual progress makes good and evil understandable. When I understand what's good and what's evil, then I can make the right choice. If I don't understand, I'm just making choices with without thinking, with no intellectual involvement. And that's where the problem seems to be. As we progress intellectually, we will be able to make better choices. We will be able to look at the situation, for example, from outside the situation itself, and make a decision: oh, I should do this or I should do this, and knowing why I'm making such decisions. And then he talks about civilized cultures. Intellectual progress among civilized cultures has received all the stimuli it could desire, and it has reached an unprecedented level. And I think nobody's going to disagree with that. The amount of technology that we have, the intellectual progress that we were able to bring to our times. If you go back, let's say, 200-300 years ago, we don't have to go back far. 300 years ago was before the Industrial Revolution. It was a whole different story. So yes, there is, Susanna was actually talking about this thing. We were able to bring intellectual progress to an unprecedented level. Let me try to explain, maybe graphically to you, showing you something on the screen, how these two interconnect. How come intellectual progress generates moral progress, and what's the mechanics behind it? So in theory, okay, if we just take the text from the book, intellectual progress generates moral progress, which I'm representing here through these graphics. Now, first question, is 100% of the intellectual progress applied to moral progress? Yes or no? I don't think so. I don't think it's 100% of the intellectual progress being transferred to the moral level. Because if that was true, we would be in a completely different situation. So there is some loss here. Not all the intellectual progress, the energy that emanates from it, not all of it is going to moral progress. So there's residues somewhere. Part of this energy, part of the system is being, there's a leak somewhere, if you will. Yes, there's leak. One of the leaks is not really a leak, it's a necessity, which is part of the intellectual progress feedbacks into intellectual progress itself, so we can use it for even more progress. For example, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already done. All I have to do is, oh, I know about this, so let me take it from here. We never go back in time in terms of intellectual or intelligence to do that. We pick up from where we left time, or where the level of intellectuality is. I use what I have, so that feeds back into intellectual progress itself. But there's more leakage. Part of it is being used, and I'll tell you, great part of it is being used for material progress. And that's where things start complicating. The amount, or let's put in mathematical terms, I think it's going to be hopefully easy for you to understand. The percent of the intellectual progress used for moral progress is way less than the one used for material progress. It's not the same thing, and well, why? Allan Kardec explains to us in Spirit's book. He explains in words. I'm going to put this in a graphic form, so hopefully it will be able for all of us to go through this and understand it. Allan Kardec, based on the teachings from the spirits, he actually asks the spirits if he is allowed to categorize the spirits according to their level of advancement or evolution. And the spirits say, yeah, you can do whatever you want, as many categories you want, you give the names you want, as long as the teachings are preserved. And so he goes for it, and he creates this 10 categories that you see here from the left side of your screen, impure all the way to the high order spirits. There are 9 categories here. What the problem is, the percent of intellectual progress transferred to moral progress is not the same for every category. For example, for impure spirits, or let's say impure and frivolous, the first two, maybe the first 2 or 3, the amount that is transferred to moral progress is minimum, very minimum. If you go looking over to the right side of your screen, the learned, the wise, the high order spirits, a lot of their intellectual progress is transferred to moral progress. Isn't that interesting? So the first question comes now, hold on. If I'm not feeling that there is progress, where am I on that scale? Am I on high order and wise? Probably not. I'm probably all the way to the far left of the screen, and that's why the Earth is a planet of trials and expiations for people and spirits on that level, at that level, like we are. So if we look at, once again here to the left of your screen, the impure spirits, they receive just a little bit of a transfer from intellectual progress to moral progress, but to material, it's the other way around. Most of the intellectual progress for less advanced spirits are used for material progress, not for moral. So we end up with a graphic or a sketch like this. Hopefully, it's easy for you to follow what I'm saying. But the more left we are, the more material progress there's going to be and less moral progress is going to be. Until we are able to, little by little, and it's going to take a long time, meaning it's going to be a lot of incarnations ahead of this time, that will allow us to widen our green arrows on the top. Jesus used to call this the narrow door. What is the narrow door? Why is this the narrow door? Because for me to go from intellectual progress to moral progress, it's difficult. The narrow is too straight. It's the door is too narrow. And why is that? Because for impure and frivolous and so, the door is wide towards material progress, and it's narrow towards moral progress. And that's exactly what Jesus came to explain to us. One day, we're all going to be closer to the other side of the screen. We're going to be closer to the wise, the learned, the wise, the high orders, and everything is going to be different. Our perception of moral progress as compared to intellectual progress is going to change. It's going to be different. And here's Allan Kardec once again talking about this in words. Moral progress has also occurred, although not at the same rate. What do you mean, rate? The rate perceived by frivolous and impure spirits is not the same rate perceived by the other spirits. For example, wise and high order and learned, it's not the same for all, because level of evolution matters until we get to the apogee of perfection, which we are far from. We have not reached that yet. We will. At one point we will. But for now, we need to work on widening that green arrow. We need to work on our spirit so we can widen that. And that's the only way we're going to progress. Civilization, as Susanna brought this morning, earlier today, it puts an end to some of the evil as it perfects itself. Because then at one point, evil is just going to disappear. Our moral progress is going to get to a point where we are no longer going to be a planet or an orb for trials and expiations, but for what we call regeneration, where evil is going to disappear. Morality will develop and civilization will be purified, all as a consequence of our intellectual level. So I think it's important for us to understand the Spiritist hierarchy that I showed you here, those groups, those categories, because it does matter. We are not at the same level, okay? Morality and intelligence are two forces that they will achieve balance at one point in time, but we have to harmonize with the divine laws. We have to harmonize with that. We have to raise our moral standards. First of all, we have to be willing to do it. Once we do it, and as we do it, we will be approaching these two avenues: moral development and intellectual development. And then we're going to have a society which is totally different than today. And in talking about society, I want to show you something about morality in our society. Let's think about this. Why have we stopped the progress in the moral progress? Or why are we having such a hard time? Okay, going back in time, Moses brings the 10 revelations. Jesus comes in later to confirm these revelations. What are these? It's a set of moral values. So here they are, 10 moral values. Let's pick one as an example. For example, don't kill. It's in there. Moses presents this to the population, to all the guys, to the people in place. And it's hard to follow that. So what he does is he attaches to the moral values what he called disciplinary laws. We're going to call social laws because that would be a more modern word for that. So the moral values generate the social laws. So for example, moral value, don't kill. Social law, don't kill, because if you kill, for example, you're going to go to jail. That's a social law. That's changeable with time. That's changeable from place to place. It's not a universal law. But every society, every group of people, every country, whatever it is, has its own social laws, which in theory are addressing moral values. Those social laws are going to be the ones that Jesus said, I'm not changing the laws, the moral values, but I'm changing the social laws. They have to be adjusted. And with that adjustment, it generates our, or it will influence our behavior and our attitudes. For example, if the social law which addresses don't kill is, if you kill, you're going to go to jail, before I kill, I'm going to think about it because I know I'm going to go to jail. I'm not interested in that. For example, in the old days, that wouldn't apply before the 10 Commandments. You know, I don't like you, you don't like me, we just get the sword, run through your body, and that's all done. And then go do the same thing to the next one, or somebody's going to do that to me. Now things are different because there's this social law that addresses a moral value. The problem, and everything works. This is exactly what it should be. But there's a problem. With time, we started changing attitudes, walking away from social laws or trying to fool the social laws. And of course, indirectly, the moral values. So we adjusted the social laws. So let's go again. Moral value, don't kill. Social law, don't kill because you're going to go to jail. My behavior is, I'm not killing. But let's say, for example, somebody comes with the following idea. Well, we're going to make a slight adjustment to this law, and we're going to say, don't kill. If you kill, you go to jail. But if it's your first crime, you're going to be forgiven. That's an adjustment. That's a new social law that has nothing to do with the first. Now, with the creation of several of these social laws, we came to what we believe are values of our societies, and they're not. They're just false values based on not moral values, based on adjusted social laws that satisfy our behaviors and attitudes. So now we are above the law. The law is a consequence of my attitude and behavior in most of our societies across the world. We have to stop this because this is preventing us from moral development. How do we stop this? The answer is right here on the box below of all, where it says behavior and attitudes. The bad behaviors that we have seen, especially in the past, I would say maybe 2 or 3 years across the globe, they are necessary evil. They have to be brought up. They have to emerge so we know what's wrong. If they do not emerge, we will not know what's wrong. We can't fix that wrong thing. Is going to rotten our progress, and we can't really progress because we're not seeing what makes it not happen. The excess of evil gets to a point where when we understand it, it's time for a different thing. Now we need the good and we need reforms. And that's kind of where we are going to if we're not there by now, but that's exactly what we are going. We are discussing things today around the globe, moral things that we were not discussing, say, 50 years ago. It wouldn't even cross our minds. For example, 50 years ago, we had no, let's say, hacking, where, computer hackers would go into a bank and steal money. That's something new. It's something from our times. So, but it addresses the same bad behaviors that we have had throughout generations and generations. And here's what the Spirit tells us, and I think this is the key of it. Good is brought out of evil itself. It's kind of this, in simple words. It has to get worse before it gets better. It will not get any better if it doesn't get worse. And it's getting worse. In quotes, that's our perception. That's part of the law, the divine law. It has to be it, so we get better. We won't get better until we don't feel the need to get better. And like I said, I think we're getting to that point. Spiritism is here to explain this to us. Look at this definition from Allan Kardec in this small, tiny little book, 50 or 60 pages. Spiritism's essential objective is humankind's moral evolution. One needs not look for anything else in it except what can be an aid for humankind's moral and intellectual progress. So what is he telling us here? That Spiritism is going to explain this moral versus intellectual progress. There are other translations. I put a second translation in English here from the British literature, and the original in French. So there's no mistake. Oh, he said that. It wasn't really that. It's in French. I'm not going to do what Dan did here, read in French, because I would really embarrass myself. So I can't do that. I'm sorry. It's for you, Dan. But what matters is this is a great message. This is the great message from Spiritism. It's here to explain to us exactly what we are trying to address on the topic that we chose to speak today. A few things that we maybe need to take home to our pillows tonight, and every night I do. Let's go through a few of them. I'm going to give you 4 things to think about. For us to think about, not you, us. I'm myself included, of course. Number 1, sustainability. Well, can we sustain intellectual progress without morality for much longer? Can we? Can we keep going the way we do without, trying to widen that green arrow? If we don't do this, and we're not doing too much at least, if we don't do this, all of our systems are going to crash. Our political systems, wherever it is, in every country, they're going to fall down. Our economic systems, all of them, they're going to disappear. Education, healthcare, sports, whatever, religion, everything. Without morality, all these systems are going to disappear. So how much more can we do before we look into morality? Well, we just had an indication from Spirit's book. It needs to get worse before it gets better. Number 2, overcoming our moral limitations. We all have them. Overcoming moral limitations is what would start to widen that green arrow. I would have to, first of all, devote time and energy to create or to list my inventory of beliefs. This is what I believe, this is who I am, and this is what is morally challenging for me. This. Because if we don't do this, we're just going to keep rolling, close our eyes for morality and just going. We're not going to go anywhere. We're going to crash and burn. We can't sustain this for much longer. So one way of starting to change is inventory of beliefs. What do I believe as a person? What do we believe as a family, as a city, as a country, and so, and all the way up to the planet. Number 3, good is brought out of evil itself, as we saw from the Spirit's book. Well, vices have to turn into virtues, but violence is not the answer for anything. We have I put violence here because of the latest happenings, the latest news, especially this past 10 days, 2 weeks. Violence was never, and it will never be, a form of force or power. Violence is a form of weakness. Every time I'm violent, every time I try to impose something on somebody else, that just tells that somebody else I'm weak. There's no power and no force here. It's just a wrong perception. That would be spirits who act with violence to convey or to think they're going to convey force and power onto others. These are spirits where the level of advancement, moral advancement, is very low. Those are the ones that see the narrow door, because violence is a clear form of weakness. And number four, making better choices. That would be the solution to everything. That would be the bomb, if you will. Making better choices. Well, that's a tough one. But let me bring you this here. We are still choosing Barabbas over Jesus to this day. We are still choosing Barabbas. When are we going to start choosing Jesus over Barabbas? That would be the day of the change. That would be the beginning of the change. If we look at Jesus, look at Barabbas, and we make that choice, and that's pure free will, and we're still choosing Barabbas, That's time for an inventory of beliefs. Absolutely. That's a time to stop and say, I'm not doing the right thing. And if I'm not doing the right thing, I won't get to any sort of, not even close to happiness. Because for well-being, emotional and health well-being as well, I need to be in peace with myself. And I can't be in peace with myself if every day of my life, or every week, or every month, I chose Barabbas over Jesus. And when I say that, there's a kind of a second layer in that statement, because a lot of times we say like this, oh my God, I'm going to do this and this. Jesus, follow me, please come here with me. Theoretically, we are asking Jesus to follow us. Is that what it should be? Or should it be that we are following him? Because those are different things. One is when I follow him. The other is when I ask him to follow me. Ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. He's not going to follow me. So that's all about making these better choices, making these understanding good and evil. And for that, I need intellectual progress. That was the whole point of it. So I can make better choices. I can start changing myself, changing the ones around me, and propagating my changes, my good changes, of course, my positive changes, to others. And that will start to widen my green arrow. And then I'm going to start going from a less advanced level to mid-sized advanced level to more advanced levels. And that's actually the purpose of spirits incarnating on Earth. Okay, and Spiritism is here to show us how to do that. Spiritism is, I need a new philosophy to do this. The philosophy that we are using today, or that we have been using through incarnations and incarnations and incarnations, is just not working. I need a new philosophy. A new philosophy that can show me how to morally improve. Okay, I don't know if you can see this here, but this is the cover of the Spirits book. I want you to read the very first line here. Spiritist philosophy. That's before the title of the book. It's a new philosophy. It's a book of a philosophy of life that I can use for myself as a tool to improve morality by understanding everything that we spoke here, how my intellectual progress can align with my moral progress, what changes I have to make, and why it's not working. And hopefully we were able to get that to you, and why it's not working, and what changes have to be made. This book is just fantastic. It's not the only book. It's the first book of a brand new philosophy starting off 1857 with Allan Kardec in the Spirits book. Here's something very interesting. For me, when I saw this phrase first time years ago, it just struck me. This is written by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Let me tell him who he is. Jean-Jacques Rousseau is one of the great philosophers in France. Around 1750, a movement in France raised. It was called the Age of Enlightenment, where a large group of philosophers, Jean-Jacques Rousseau was one of the leaders. They said, we have been in the dark for years and years and years because the church doesn't let us ask anything. Everything is you can ask, you can nothing. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau would say, no, we have a brain. We want philosophy back into the game, and philosophy is asking and asking and asking. And then they had this movement, the Age of Enlightenment, which produced a lot of interesting things in France. Then Jean-Jacques Rousseau discarnates, he dies, and he comes back as a spirit. So this is something he said as a spirit after discarnating. I think that Spiritism is an entirely philosophical study of concealed causes and inner movements of the soul, which have been little defined or not defined at all until today when that was written, 1861. It explains more than it reveals new horizons. And he wraps up with this beautiful phrase: I view Spiritism as a lever that breaks down the barriers of blindness. Isn't that fantastic? So hopefully we are not going to be blind anymore, at least for not too long. Thank you so much. Peace for everybody. And we'll get back to Dan now, please. Dan.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to hear you. Thank you for that really well developed presentation. We do have a couple of questions, and before we get to them, we just want to remind folks that they can always enter their questions and comments on the USSF Facebook page or YouTube page. Just a reminder as well that you may be watching this through some other page because there's a lot of sharing going on, which we're very grateful for, but we will not be able to see your comments unless you are in the USSF page on Facebook or YouTube. But we do have a couple of questions here for you, Luiz. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so one of the questions that comes up here is from Dione Correa on Facebook, and she asks, it's hard to get to the top without moral and with moral and intellectual together. So who would you say is an example today who has reached this top? Is it the Pope? Is it Gandhi? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't, I think, concentrate on people exactly, but on situations. For example, if you take the technology that we have today, okay? For example, let's take a smartphone, okay? A smartphone had it has a purpose in mind, which is you to be able to talk on the phone, with somebody from anywhere. Today, things are slightly different. You can have your smartphone in your pocket, you're walking down the street, and you see a scene of, let's say, violence. And you can use that smartphone, and it has been done, by the way, several times over and over again. So people are recording scenes of non-ethical, non-moral behavior. And what that does is these things later on, they get viral in, throughout the media and the internet. And what they're showing us is that there's something wrong in there. And you see, those people who do this, they are helping the process without being, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody on the top, because it's not a personal thing, it's a collective thing. Of course, Gandhi and Mother Teresa and all of these people, of course, they were not in the lower levels of advancement. They were high order spirits or wise spirits. So you could ask one of these guys, what do you think of all the problems in the world? The world is going crazy. It's gonna end up, bad. They wouldn't agree with you. They wouldn't say, no. For me, everything is okay. I'm doing my job. I'm doing my thing. I'm doing my prayers. And so you see, because their level of advancement is way beyond ours. So their perception of all this trouble and all these problems is not the same of ours. Chico Xavier in Brazil, same thing. Luther King, several, we can name some people. And the reason why they were different than us is their level of advancement. They would see things just different than what we do. We're going to get there one day, but we're not ready for that yet.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. We also have another question from our friends at the Spirit Society of North Beach. Hi, North Beach. They ask a very interesting question here, Luiz. It would be great if you to chime in, please. They say, if intelligence is developed before morality, why can't we see good people? Why can we see good people without instruction or without a well-developed intelligence?
Yeah, you see, the level of intelligence, once you're incarnated, you have your level of intelligence, you're incarnated. From there, we're going to develop moral. Now, the spirit pre-exists, or the soul pre-exists the body. The soul is where morality is and intelligence is. When we come down here, we're going to try to use the material world, that's why we incarnate, to develop both of them. And people without instruction, you can have people, for example, masterminds of crime. They are extremely intelligent, but they use that against morality. They use that for the bad things. And you have the other way around too. We have seen people such as Hitler and Bin Laden and several out there. We don't want to really keep saying names, but these people are masterminds of crime. They are absolutely intelligent. They just didn't use intelligence they didn't try to align their intelligence with morality. They were just, not very advanced spirits. They were in the lower part of the scale, if you will. And that's why we have, or we saw what they did because of that. Back to you, Dan.
Thank you, sir. We got a couple more here if you have the time, which I hope you do, because we've got you set down on that chair there. I think you're nailed down. We can't escape. But we do have another one here that's come to us through the U.S. Spiritist Federation page as well. And the question is, despite the level of intellectual progress already achieved, why does it seem so difficult to commit to moral progress? Why is it so hard to do it?
To commit to moral progress, first of all, we have to have the right tool. The right tool is to be at a certain level of intelligence. Let's say that we just have enough intelligence to be able to apply to moral progress. And it doesn't get applied. Why? Because there's a residue. Part of it is going to the material progress. So how can we do this? There's something in neuroscience called density of attention. Density of attention is, if you put your attention on something so hard, if you focus on something so hard, you lose track of what's around you. Okay, there are several videos on the internet that show that. There's a very, very, very famous video where there are some guys playing basketball, and the narrator says, we're going to play 2 minutes of people playing basketball. I want you to count the number of passes that they do during those 2 minutes. So you do that, you count the passes. At the end, the narrator comes back and says, did you see the monkey crossing the screen? And everybody, no monkey. And then we replay, and the monkey is there right on the screen, right in front of us. How come we didn't see it? Because of the density of attention. Our attention was 100% on the ball. And the same thing happens here. Our attention is very little towards morality, towards moral standards. The density of our attention is in a material world. It's in getting things, in having things. So if our density of attention is that, it doesn't, I'm going to say in quotes, it doesn't occur to us the fact that we need to do morality. And then simple things can shut down that channel. And these two simple things are selfishness and pride. Those are the two things that will not let our density of attention switch from one thing to another. They shut down our connection to morality, and we just don't see it. We can't progress. We can't really do that anymore. And then it just keeps going the way it was. Dan.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think you tackled a question by Elinir there as well, selfishness and pride. Thank you for that. We do have one final question for you here, sir, and it comes for us via YouTube from our friends at the Spiritist Society of Ireland. And they ask, Luiz, do you think this moment will boost our moral values and perception about the world? What's Spiritism role or understanding about this outbreak?
Yeah, I think we addressed that in the talk itself. If I think the moment will boost the moral values, me personally, yes, I think so, because like the Spirit said, good will come out of the evil itself. And evil, if we could quantify evil today compared to, let's say, 500 years ago, there's much more perception of evil today. And yes, that much more is going to get to a critical mass. And when the critical mass point is reached, we're all going to look at it and say, no, stop, come on, let's change this thing. And yes, that's going to be the break point. I personally think we're getting close to the critical mass, and things are going to change. But we addressed that during the talk. Back to you, Dan.